Okay, I think we're ready to get started. Hamadak yapi, chante washte iu hanape chiusapi, Tasha Peltier amajapi. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our conversation today. My name is Tasha Peltier. I'm going to be kind of moderating the discussion today and taking us all through this important dialogue. So today's event is hosted by the SAGE Development Authority. SAGE's Anpetu Wi Dialogues are devoted to raising awareness for Native American issues and inviting friends of Standing Rock to join in on the efforts to develop Anpetu Wi, which will be a 235 megawatt wind farm on our ancestral lands here at Standing Rock. Revenue from the wind farm will also be used to support the people, including community-driven initiatives here at Standing Rock, like the Wičhóni Clinic and Farm. As I mentioned, my name is Tasha Peltier. I currently serve as the co-executive director of the Wičhóni Clinic and Farm. I am Hunkpapa Lakota and I come from the Standing Rock Nation. I also have a master's degree in public health with a focus on American Indian public health. I've also worked in a couple different realms in the community, working on trying to improve the quality of care, reduce disparities, and just improve overall health within our community. So I'm really excited to be here today talking on behalf of the Wičhóni Clinic and Farm. And what I'm gonna do right now is just turn it over to, we're gonna go through each of our amazing panelists and let them introduce themselves and talk about their connection to our organization. So we'll go ahead and start with Elena.
Midakyapi, Yushka Wachiankapi, Elena Igoshodamachiapi, Naha Hochka Kudepiwi, Hemie, Yuha Chantewashenapi, Chuzapi, Wazia Ekta Lakota Makocheki, Iowaslata Kichtahaska Mataha, Michichaki Num, Michichaki Yamani, Na Tewichawaki Hila, Atewayaki John Eagleshield Senior Chiapi, Naha Inawayaki, Valerie Eagleshield Chiapi, na Wičhóni Clinic and Farm ekta wawashi chamu. Naha wankaftuya Owaiowa University of Washington ekta won't spekia. So my name is Elena Eagleshield. I am from Standing Rock. I am currently the co-executive director for the Wičhóni Clinic and Farm. As Tasha said, I am very happy and excited to be here, to be in this conversation with everybody, just about the work that we are envisioning and dreaming and co-creating with our community. So, Pilamaya.
Awesome, thanks Elena. We'll go on to Rupa.
Hello everybody, my name is Rupa Maria. I come from Punjabi ancestry, born and raised in Ramaytush territory, living right now in unceded, occupied Chochenyo territory in the territory of Wičhóni. And I was very grateful to be called by California natives to assist in the medical response at the Standing Rock prayer camps. And during that process, I was also honored to meet several Lakota grannies who asked me to be involved in creating a long-term clinic to decolonize medicine in Standing Rock territory. So I am so honored to be part of this project and very inspired by how it's developing. Thank you.
Thanks, Rupa. Sunshine?
My name's Sunshine Rose. I'm from Standing Rock Reservation. I'm a mother of one child, and I have my bachelor's in environmental science. Through that program, took ethnobotany, so I've been practicing preventative and integrated healthcare for myself and my family for almost 10 years now, and I look forward to watching the clinic grow as I'm the secretary on board right now.
Thanks, Sunshine. And then we have Linda.
Anpetu everybody. Hi. Late as usual. I'm Linda Black Elk. I am the Food Sovereignty Skills Educator at United Tribes Technical College, which of course is the tribal college in Bismarck, North Dakota, just north of the Standing Rock Reservation. My children are enrolled members of Standing Rock and Cheyenne River, and I've been very fortunate that to have been involved very heavily in the No DAPL camps. Through that, I started working, I met Rupa and started working with her and the development of the mini Wičhóni clinic. So super honored to be here with you guys today. I'm an ethnobotanist. I guess that's important too.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So really, I think before we get started, I just want to remind everybody that we do have a comment section open. We invite the listeners to go ahead and drop in your comments, or if you have questions. We're going to try really hard to acknowledge all those questions and comments at the Q&A portion at the end of our conversation. So I think what we'll start with, first of all, is, everybody, I think it's important for everybody to understand kind of how our organization came to be. And I'd really like to call on Rupa and Linda to kind of talk about how this developed from No DAPL and how we've gotten to the point that we are now.
Linda, do you want to start?
Sure, I can, or you can. I was pointing my lips at you, Rupa, a second ago.
Okay.
So you go ahead and start, and then I'll.
Okay.
Okay.
So as I said, I'm a physician based in San Francisco, California, at the University of California, San Francisco, where I work as a professor of medicine. And my area of interest is looking at how social structures impact our health. So I was called by California Native folks who were heading out there and noticing that the police response was becoming more intense towards the people protesting the pipeline. And so I helped to coordinate the medical response there. And when we were there, what developed very beautifully and organically was a medical village of different kinds of practitioners, herbalists and acupuncturists and body workers and people practicing different kinds of spiritual medicines, as well as people like me who are, Western trained doctors. I was also raised with a grandmother who practiced Ayurvedic traditions. So I was always raised with this combination of traditional medicines together with Western medicines. And what really emerged in that beautiful moment was this vision and cosmological groundings of Lakota Dakota perspectives. And so from that came this desire to have a clinic that was permanent, that was based in the community. And through that intention, there were some listening circles. And, one of the first things that came up was that you can't decolonize medicine without decolonizing food. You can't actually have autonomy in our medical systems without understanding the connection between food and all the things that are considered medicine in traditional perspectives and cultures. I love the way sunshine is coming in. It's children, man. They're beautiful. And so, so that's how we really, that's where this vision started from. And I can say that from my perspective as a medical doctor, that I've been very interested in how people who've suffered under the heel of colonialism, and that includes my people and all over the world, people who have suffered under colonial rule for the last, 600 years, how our bodies have been impacted through time. And what we do see is that impact is really through the lens of inflammation. The diseases that people suffer from in modern industrialized societies are diseases that really didn't exist before colonialism at the rates that they are. And those are diabetes and cancer and autoimmune disease, cardiovascular disease, Alzheimer's disease. And what we're learning now is that all of these diseases have at their root a disrupted inflammatory pathway. And so what is it about other kinds of medicines that can address those inflammatory pathways? What is it about food sovereignty and sovereignty around power and sovereignty in all realms that can re-regulate our immune systems? And I think that you know, this is really where the future of medicine is going, towards perspectives that can illuminate how we are getting sick through the architecture of the world that has been created around us, and how we can rearrange that architecture for our benefit. And what is amazing about most Indigenous communities that live, you know, throughout the world right now, who are living traditionally, they don't have these diseases. And so there is a wisdom in Indigenous knowledge systems that protects against those inflammatory diseases. And so how can we, instead of going back, how can we move forward in new ways that can harness the you know, reawaken the wisdom that's there and reintegrate it into much more holistic visions of medicine. So that's what I'm excited to be. That's like the most exciting thing I've ever been a part of.
Awesome. Thanks so much for sharing that, Rupa. So back in 2016, I was still teaching at Sitting Bull College, which is the tribal college on the Standing Rock Reservation. And of course, I lived on Standing Rock for basically about half my life. And I remember when camp first started, and I went there, you know, there were only a few people in camp at that time, but I had this big box of basically like lip balms and homemade hand sanitizer and things that I thought people in a camp like that would need. And I just walked around handing it out to people, you know, and it's amazing to think about what it became, because as we started getting more people in camp, you know, we started getting some, you know, amazing, knowledgeable street medics, people, you know, doctors, physicians like Rupa started showing up. We had herbalists, really like just amazing, well-trained herbalists showed up. We had body workers, you know, actually like licensed chiropractors and acupuncturists started showing up. We had a lot of people who were experienced in mental health fields show up in camp. And so we had all of these different modalities. And I remember being there one day when a woman got ill, and, you know, 3 of these different you know, people experienced in these different modalities came up to her and worked with her to help her get better. And I thought, that is what healthcare should be. That is what wellness should be, right? All of us, all these, you know, looking at a person as a whole being, instead of just trying to treat someone, you know, physical symptoms, but, you know, looking at them as a whole being, and us all working, oh, sorry about that, working together. To help and heal. And yeah, it was such a beautiful thing. And I believe that that's, you know, where the clinic started to sort of formulate and grow. And yeah, like very early on, it became really clear that we were going to have to start looking at growing food as a preventative sort of healthcare, right? And I believe that's what it is. Growing your own food, farming is preventative, right? It's essential to wellness. Not just being able to eat really good food, but having access to, you know, having your hands in the soil, you know, breathing in that soil, being outside in the sun, all, you know, super important to health and well-being. So yeah, I mean, that's really where how it started. It was so funny because back when Rupa and myself and her partner, her husband, and my husband, you know, we were having meetings and talking, and Sarah Jumping Eagle was there, and, you know, some other people who were there in the beginning, and we had these talking circles. And I remember I thought to myself, you know what, Elena Eagleshield and Tasha Peltier are in, you know, this public health program. They'd be really great to talk to, you know, plus they're enrolled members of Standing Rock. And I remember talking to them, like just sort of interviewing them. And then, yeah, I don't know, I can't remember how many months later, I thought to myself, why are they not board members? And they became board members. And then I thought, why are they not executive director? One of them, you know, and then now they're executive co-directors. And so, you know, such a beautiful thing. And, you know, I was just actually looking at the panel and thinking, oh my gosh, Sunshine is a former student of mine from Sitting Bull College, and so is Elena. And, you know, both took my ethnobotany class. And I just think that that's so crazy and amazing to think about, that, you know, things come full circle. Of course, they both have their own ancestral knowledge that's been passed down to them from their ancestors, but it always feels really good to see people that you've worked with or who've been your students to be doing such amazing things. So, and I'm just so proud. But yeah, so that's, you know, sort of my, you know, I love to teach, and I love to be a part of all this. And of course, I have a really, I have Standing Rock is always, you know, that's my community. Like I said, I've been there for so long, even though I'm not enrolled there. It's been such a part of my heart because my children are enrolled there. So I really feel like that's my home, and that's where I've learned what I know, you know, learned from so many of the elders there. And that's really what's informing the clinic, is that ancestral knowledge of local people. And yeah, it's a beautiful thing. So thanks.
Yeah, amazing. You know, it's just been really exciting to see the transformation. So like she mentioned, Elena and I came on, you know, as board members a few years ago, and then it just transitioned. And I'm so thankful that you know, this initiative very well could have fizzled out after camp dismantled. You know, it's not easy to keep some of these things going. You know, everybody went home in all directions, and we were able to kind of keep this vision, and we may be reimagining things, but the intent of really reclaiming our ways of health and wellness are still there. And so it's just really exciting. And I know, Sunshine, you have shared before that you even had experiences at camp, you know, as a young woman. And I don't know if you're comfortable sharing kind of what your idea or what you experienced there.
Yeah, for me, a little bit at the time, I was pregnant when camp started, so it was really interesting to see how the reservation evolved. I remember the EPA director was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna set out a table because we're having, you know, we're protesting the pipeline. I was like, a table? She's like, yeah, and an overflow camp is happening. I was like, what? She's like, this whole pasture is gonna be an overflow camp. I was like, okay. And then just weird how overnight there was thousands of people in this pop-up community basically. And being pregnant, I didn't do a lot of the frontline work, but I would pick trash throughout camp. I mean, every community there's trash, it doesn't matter. And that was an easy workout skill for me to do squats and move around and feel like I was doing good through my pregnancy. And on Facebook, the Midwifery Field Clinic, I believe they're out of New Mexico. Changing Woman Initiative. They were saying that they were going to bring midwives up from New Mexico, and I told my friend how excited I was, but nervous. They're like, "Let's go find them. They're in camp." I was like, "I know, but I don't really want to go by myself." 1 second, baby. And so before that, my only health care from you. So basically my only health care through my pregnancy, at 20 weeks, I went to IHS, which is our standard health care on Standing Rock. And I signed up for a prenatal appointment, which I was asked by the doctor, the physician who was seeing me, so what do you want me to do? And at that moment, I really felt under-supported as a first-time mother. Like I had to explain to somebody who's being my healthcare provider how I can move forward. But I do have a history of being a birth doula. Even at 8 years old, I witnessed my first live birth at home. And throughout my life, I've been invited into birth spaces naturally without being trained. And I had taken a training at the time. So having to suggest measuring fecundal height and monitoring heart rates to the doctor made me feel like it wasn't the healthcare that I needed for my pregnancy. And so when we found the midwives at camp, the first thing they asked was like, how's your mental health? Are you eating good, nutritious food? And that's something the doctors never even thought of. And that's where yeah, I also got acupuncture. One day I couldn't walk because my sciatic nerve got pinched with my hips when my body was adjusting through pregnancy. And every left step when I was picking up trash would shoot pain up my body for a couple days. And I was leaving camp and I was like, man, this is so painful. I went to my grandma's because at night I would go give my grandma the update of what was happening at camp. And she called me, my friend, it's like, there's an acupuncturist, but they're leaving tomorrow. Can you come back to camp? I was like, yeah, I'm 15 miles away. So only 4 acupuncture needles and 20 minutes of therapy through the needles. And I had no more nerve pain for the rest of my pregnancy. And before that, I was willing to drive 4 hours to find an acupuncturist because intuitively I was like, that is what I need. But nobody in Bismarck could get an appointment soon. I was like, I'm in pain right now. I don't want to wait until 2 weeks from now. So having that available on our reservation was an amazing opportunity for me as a first-time mother. And she's going crazy. So moving on.
Speaking of being a mother, right? So I think, you know, we've got a pretty good idea of like, you know, how it started at camp, and you know, we have evolved and we're growing. You know, we do have a board right now, all women, nothing wrong with that, right? Women rule the world. But really we just, we're working hard, you know, we are a nonprofit organization. And so there's things that we have to do to be a viable nonprofit organization. So that's been a learning curve for us, but we're really working hard to really branch out. And I don't know, Elena, if you would be comfortable kind of talking or starting the discussion about what, you know, really our mission and vision are. I know it's pretty loose right now, but just kind of some real basic things that we've been discussing and kind of wanting to do with our organization.
Yeah, so it's actually been really a beautiful journey. I know Linda had expressed a little bit about how it started. Before that, Tasha and I were already doing, you know, whatever we could in the community. I was, you know, had worked in language immersion, and I think at the time when I became a board member, I was the director of our tribal health education program. So really trying to imagine these ways of speaking to our communities around health and wellness through our traditional lens, and that was something that had been so foreign to our tribal programs. And I think that I remember, you know, just bringing up these different ideas and things that could be possible or should be possible. And then it was just something that we hadn't been used to. And so that's when I first, like, I think it's been shown to me over and over again throughout my life, like that living in 2 different worlds. Oh, sorry about that. But living in 2 different worlds. And it wasn't, I guess I didn't start to connect what was meant by that, by our elders and our community members, until working in language revitalization, working in trying to bring, you know, traditional health back into our communities, because we separate, you know, we've been taught to separate things. And so through my studies, I'm working through my PhD right now at the University of Washington. And through some of the things that I'm learning, there's amazing authors out there who are doing a lot of this land-based work, you know, figuring out the reconnections back to land, back to community, back to our ways of basically communicating with each other. And throughout the first year, I feel like I was angry a lot of the times because I was learning things that basically had helped to explain my experience growing up on the res. So Tasha and I, you know, we had grown up together at the Tratranka Iotake Wiwengwa Chipi, which is one of our ceremonies on our reservation. And so we grew up there. We had this deep, you know, spiritual understanding. And then so we had that initial connection to each other also. But then we also would come into this, like, I don't know, modern res world or whatever. Modern is probably not the best word, but this world where we felt like we kind of had to separate things. And until I started to learn why that was being done through like my studies, because that's just how I learn, I've learned a lot about these theories and these things that were imposed on us through the government. Like, for instance, there was a safety zone theory a book by Teresa McCarty. She talks about, it's called To Remain an Indian, and it basically goes through the reports through, IHS on reservation life and all of those things. And they talked about how they would give Indigenous people just a little bit of room to play Indian and to do, Indian things. But then if they got too deep into it, and if they were starting to seem like they were favoring their own ways over these Western ways, then they would pull them back or reprimand them or abuse them, do these things to them. And so there was this safety zone where they kept Indigenous people. And so when I was learning those things, I was feeling angry. I was like, oh my gosh, okay, I get it now. My dad has kept the language and culture alive, but then there was a disconnect for us too, where he didn't teach me for a long time because whatever his own his policing of himself, right, where we had been taught to be this certain way for so long. And when our ceremonies went underground and our elders were introduced to this like basically underground generation, when our ceremonies weren't allowed to happen and our medicines weren't allowed to be used, that was something that's like in our psyche, right? And so when they talk about living in two worlds, when I was growing up, I was like, I don't get it. Like, I'm not going to go to jail for speaking my language. I can go to ceremonies and I don't feel scared. Why do we have to live in two worlds? But I didn't understand like how much it had come to a point where we do it to ourselves. And so I think the pivotal moment that happened in 2016 when when we were opposing the Dakota Access Pipeline and all standing together as a community of all nations all over the world, that was a turning point, not only for Standing Rock, but for people, in the world, Indigenous people and non-Indigenous people all over the world, where we got to basically flip that back over again, where we realized that we didn't have to keep things underground. And also there was like a forgiveness that we started to see within our communities, because I think we, not only people in our communities forgiving each other, but also like having a forgiveness towards our elders and our community members for doing the best they could with what they knew and what they had. And so as we became part of this clinic, and so in the camp too, I was actually more involved with the school stuff, the Mini Wičhóni Nakichije Owaiowa, which is now the Mini Wičhóni Nakichije Woenspe. And that work is continuing to move forward. We're imagining, schooling to be something that is integrated into this clinic, like medicine, and into our tribal councils and our tribal programs, and how can we bring our youth into those and see what's needed to change in this world that they live in, so that they're not confused about this, living in two worlds. And so as we're moving forward, it's so awesome to see the movement of healthcare from like a holistic and Indigenous lens. And Tasha and I have been able to, the universe is just lining things up all over the place with us and our community. And we're able to be in conversations all the time where people are bringing back, ceremonies and traditional birthing practices and all these other ways that have always been there, but we have held on to them also. And really a lot of us who were able to know those things and to be involved in those ceremonies, we're privileged to be able to do that. And it shouldn't be a privilege. It should be something that is for all of our communities and our people. And so Sunshine had been talking about birth, and through our conversations with our community members and with our tribal programs, because a first part of this is really rebuilding those relationships to each other and those responsibilities to each other. And so a majority part of our work so far has been reintroducing ourselves, basically. Even though we've been in our community this whole time, we're like, okay, we're not trying to live in two worlds no more. This is what we've been hearing from our elders, our community members. This is something that we, is like a dream project, passion work that we would like to do. We'd love for you guys to come be a part of it with us. And then also understanding like everybody's on a different level of their healing and their journey, through their own things. And so it's been really beautiful, and I'm so thankful to be in this work and a part of it decolonizing, those leadership roles where women are starting to become equals with men, and women are sharing the leadership positions as well, where it's not just like, oh, one leader, you know, we're figuring out what that looks like to share these commitments to each other. And so yeah, I'm just so thankful. I don't know if you want to share more, Tasha, about some of the conversations we've been having. I could go on for ebbs.
Yeah, I think, you know, even just the discussion about living in two worlds, you know, I remember, I think it's really complicated too, because there's been a huge disruption in our way of life, right? So there was a whole time frame when we weren't allowed to practice that, or like you said, people had to police themselves. And I remember thinking, like when we were younger, I remember like after Sundance, just that good feeling you had. And my dad would always say, now the hard part is hanging on to that, you know, holding on to that and carrying that with you, because then we go back into, even though we lived on the res, we go back into society where a lot of the societal norms are contradictory to our way of thinking and how we are and how we live. And so that was difficult, even as a young person, like, oh, I know I shouldn't do this because this is what, you know, our teachings are, but this is what everybody else, you know, so just trying to navigate through that as a young person too. And so we were really fortunate to have those teachings. And I think that foundation is really important as you become an adult, you know, when you do start to make decisions about how you want to live your life, you know, having that foundation. And like Elena said, you know, we want everybody to have access to that. And so it's just really exciting, some of the conversations we've had. And you know, we've met with other organizations, and we always say, you know, we don't want to reinvent the wheel. There are tons of communities across the Indian country that are doing the same work. You know, it may look different, but we really want to learn from them. How are you doing this? What, you know, what does the structure look like? And so that's been, you know, a lot of our focus has been on how do we do this, and then also engage in our community. You know, we've tried to do a lot. COVID's made it difficult, but we've tried to engage in conversations with people locally here, like what does health look like for our communities? What things have we lost? Like Elena mentioned, you know, our birthing practices. Currently, we don't have many options for our women other than a Western style birth where you're going to the hospital, and there are people that have that knowledge, but we don't have any kind of formal way to offer that to people. And so, you know, looking at that, and we've had discussions about all kinds of things like end of life. You know, how do we grieve when we're losing people? You know, what coping mechanisms are we using, you know, that maybe weren't what our people used to do? And so just looking at all kinds of things. And then food is a big part of it. You know, I think Rupa and Linda both talked about how important food is in our wellness. And right now, you know, we have a lot of things that are working against us, right? We live in an area that would be considered a food desert. And so we have to work really hard to get access to the things that we need to nourish our bodies. But we also have a lot of unlearning to do, you know, because of the way we've transformed, I guess, the way we live, we may not want those things, you know. Or I think about like our young kids, you know, they really don't, you know, they'd rather have a bag of chips than carrots or whatever. So we have a lot of unlearning, and adults too, we're guilty of it as well. And so we have a lot of unlearning to do. And I think embracing it through our culture is beautiful, you know, because there's always teachings behind the things, you know, even when it's nourishing our body, there's teachings behind that. You know, it's not always going to be what's your favorite or what you like, what tastes the best, but really about feeding your body. And but yeah, I could go on and on too. I don't know if you guys have anything to add to some of that. Go ahead, Elena.
Oh, so I was just gonna say, so then so far, like with the communities that we've been, or our community members, our elders, our youth, we've been engaging in different ways. We've reached out to tribal programs, IHS, you know, all the different, the council, Standing Rock Tribal Council, just letting them know, like I said, we're building our relationships again and rebuilding our connections with each other. And so then there's kind of been like 4, I don't know, umbrella domains, for lack of better words, that we're working through right now. And this is just over and over again. These are things that are being said that community wants, and they're you know, broken down more. But the first one is really bringing back like how we take care of mothers and how we support them during and after birth, and bringing our traditional birthing and baby ceremonies back. The second one is really thinking of our elders and how we take care of our elders, in our community. So like Tasha said, like end of life, afterlife care, what are those ceremonies? How are we grieving in a way that our people would, or that we should be grieving, right? So like thinking of the different ceremonies associated with that, and then thinking of foods and how to grow them, how to develop our gardens to be nutritious, healing gardens for our communities, how to know what foods are out there. Like, Sunshine has this background, and she was like, a lot of people, we can't identify some of the things anymore. And so thinking about growing them, but then also how do we harvest them out in the wild? How do we know what could just be used and grabbed, for purposes if we're out in the wild or hunting or whatever. And then the last one is really thinking of bringing in our elders and our traditional healers. And we also know that one can get messy too, because who gets to decide who's a healer? Who gets to decide, what type of ways that we initiate that? And I know it's taboo to even pay, our healers, but I think one of the ways that Tasha and I have been thinking around that is that long time ago, our people came together to take care of our healers. We'll take care of all of our community, but thinking of healers in particular, like how do they take care of our healers, by providing food and transportation and support, through the ceremony and beyond. Our communities would come together for that. However, in this day and age, it doesn't always happen that way. And it's not always the fault of those people needing the ceremonies. Sometimes it's just they haven't been taught some of those protocols, or they haven't, experienced it. And so we, and again, that's a privilege too, to be able to have a healer or a medicine person that your family goes to, or to know multiples in the community. And so thinking of those like overarching domains, again, for lack of a better word, those are the themes that we've been hearing from our community that are really needed. And so at first it was like this big, thing that we're trying to figure out. And then as we've been moving forward, we're like, okay, it needs to start with birthing. It needs to start with the babies. It needs to start with focusing on how do we connect mothers back to the land, and then in turn connect them back to each other. And so one of the projects we're working on is developing basically a mother society to help them to reimagine what their traditional healing gardens could look like, how they can start preparing for birth, or how they can get support through breastfeeding. And like Tasha said, we have all these ways that we could think of traditional birth, and having a baby at home, is probably not for everybody. And also there's like a still a process of going through that too, because even though I grew up in our traditional ways, when I was thinking of my own birth, I gave birth at home back in September. But the process of me getting there was messy, because I felt like, hey, I don't know, I want to give birth at home. I don't know, I want to do it traditionally. I don't know, like I felt shamed out the whole time, because I think this Western view of birth makes it seem like it's okay for white women to do these practices and do things a certain way. But when we do it, it's like unheard of, or it's, you're going to get hurt. Somebody's going to get in trouble. And also there's like this focus on like the midwife and the doula, when those are support systems for the mother, and so we've been really thinking of how to focus on the mother. And this is through community connections, and them telling us like that we need to be focusing on the birthing mother, the children, and what does that connection look like for them to each other, like, developing their own society, developing their connection back to the land. And so, yeah, imagining all these things. We have a lot of land, or we have a plot of land on Standing Rock. We've been trying to, we visited the Livingstone Lodge, trying to imagine what structures could look like. We have been in contact about mobile units, Sunshine, I don't know if you want to share a little bit about that, because Sunshine has been helping to think of.
So basically on Standing Rock, our general health care, like Lena said, most of our mothers will go to Bismarck for their prenatal, or IHS in Fort Yates to visit their provider. But then there's also a satellite site in McLaughlin or Bear Soldier community. And so these two IHS clinics are about 30 miles apart, but on our large reservation, there's 8 districts. So there's only clinics in 2 out of the 8 districts. And so the mobile clinic would allow accessibility to create a rotation of pop-up either workshops that can be held in a teepee in any district in a community held space. But then also the mobile unit can allow for herbalists and holistic practitioners to come to the community and be a resource of nutrition, mental health, and holistic well-being. So it would create an accessibility to community members who may not have a vehicle. And some families are sharing homes with more than 10 people in a 3-bedroom home. So if there's more than a few people sick, it's hard to get everybody to travel. And so it might be a little bit more ideal for our people if the clinic came to them in some way.
Right. We've been kind of going back and forth with, you know, we don't have a physical space. We should probably make that known. We don't have a physical space yet. We're, like I said, we're still really new. And so we've been talking through some of that. What makes more sense? Do we have, you know, and if we do get a physical space, where is that going to be? You know, and Elena talked a little bit about the land and what's available. So we're working through all of that. And then I also wanted to raise up a little bit when she talked about the work that we have to do. I think, you know, Sunshine's been really teaching us about, you know, the healing that our land has to do too. There's been some major trauma and especially in this territory here to our land. And we've had to, you know, and she just talks about like analyzing the soil and what the changes that our land has gone through. And so we have a responsibility to take care of the land too. And so it's good for the land, it's good for us. And so that was just a really powerful discussion, I think, that we had the other day. And yeah, yay. Rupa, did you want to speak too?
Yeah, I just wanted to amplify what Elena was saying about starting with reawakening these core relationships. Also what Sunshine's saying with the earth, with ourselves, with the earth, and ourselves with each other. And so much of Western medicine has been, Western medicine itself was used as a tool, an institution to colonize different places. And so it was a way to keep colonists healthy as they encountered our foreign places. And eventually medicine became used as a way to keep the indigenous peoples in the territories healthy enough to extract the resources. And so it was never really designed to keep our communities healthy, which is why when, you know, people who are brown and Black encounter the medical community, there's often so many layers of racism and challenges feeling heard, or challenges feeling respected, or seen, even truly seen. And so that is, I think, something that's so exciting about the potential of this clinic and this work, is to take from Western medicine what feels appropriate, because there are useful things. There are things that should be used to help guide or to protect people at different stages and different diseases. And then there are also things that don't need to be used. And one of the things I think is central in concepts of Western medicine around health and disease is almost a radical distrust in life and life's processes. And I think of that first and foremost with birth. And so, like Elena was saying, this prioritization on the providers as opposed to the mother, like that our bodies know what to do when we're having babies, and that there are so many traditional practices that ground women in their ancestral traditions to go through that powerful transformation of giving birth. And so I think that it's almost metaphorical and beautiful that our work together is starting in that place of centering, like from the beginning, what are the ways in which, you know, we can support the reawakening of these relationships. And I think that that's very deeply healing.
So I wanted to add to that, because I think it's really important when we talk about, you know, Western medicine. So as someone who's worked in education for a long time, as well as working with plants and with wellness and health and wellness, I've noticed that there are tons of programs around, tons of clinics where it's a Western clinic, but they'll say, you know what, the native people here want a sweat lodge added onto the clinic. So they'll pay someone to come in and build a sweat lodge at the back of the hospital or the clinic, and it never once gets used. And what happens oftentimes is that, we're always starting from this foundation of Western education or this foundation of Western healthcare. And then we poke holes in it. We try to poke holes to add some indigenous knowledge or add, something native, and it never works. Infusion, we talked, like, I remember when I first started teaching back in the early 2000s, infusion was the key word. And it was the same way in healthcare, right? Let's try to infuse some culture. Let's try to infuse some, other ways of knowing and other ways of thinking. And it never worked. What we really have to do, and what I think so great about the clinic, is that we're starting from a foundation of indigenous knowledge and indigenous wellness. And then if we want to, like Rupa was saying, there's so much good that can also come from Western medicine and Western healthcare. We can poke holes in it and add some, Western knowledge and Western medicine in there. And so that's something I really appreciate. And then I also wanted to say that another really important aspect of the Mini Wičhóni Clinic and Farm is that we don't just look at illness as merely physical. There are, as in every community, there are so many issues with mental health and wellness. There are so many, we have issues of addiction, substance abuse. And so we have to stop looking at illness as something that's merely physical and something that we can just treat, through physical health and wellness. We have to start looking at overall wellness as being, of course, spiritual, mental, and emotional as well. And I think that we're really planning on doing that because, as we know, our people are suffering. I think of a lot of my friends and my family and my friends' family members who are experiencing mental illness, and people try to just give them a pill to make it go away, when really we need to start looking at them as whole people. And so I think that there's a lot of opportunities here with the clinic to be able to address those issues as well.
Right. I think changing that mindset too from, I think Western medicine has made us want instant gratification, right? So we want something that's going to fix us right now, and I think as Lakota people, we know that everything is a process, even our way of life, there's ways to achieve things, and it may not be fast and we may not fix things right now, but that's okay, because we're addressing all those root issues too. That's the other thing with Western medicine. Sometimes we're just masking, like you said, that physical issue or whatever, when actually there is a problem that is causing that issue that may be spiritually related or mentally, emotionally, and sometimes we don't see that addressed in Western medicine. And I think that's one of the issues, is that there's a huge disconnect between the physical. I think Linda one time said, we have issues that manifest themselves physically when it's actually other things that are causing those issues. So
yeah, and I think it's also just a good point for us to make too, is that we're trying to figure out the happy medium of our middle of connecting both whatever the good is from the Western medicine and whatever, I guess, facilities and things are already in place that could be beneficial to our people. Then how do we work with them through our through the initiatives that we're starting with the clinic to figure out how to meet the person in their whole self for whatever they need. And so in part of us making those connections, last year we actually visited Yellowknife, which is way up in the Arctic, and they have this Arctic Indigenous Wellness Foundation has these healing camps up there, and it was so beautiful. Just in the middle of winter, -40 below, they have people continuously walking miles and miles to get to those camps so that they could get the traditional counseling that they have. And so we have we've been in contact with them. They have trainings. I mean, they've been on hold now since the pandemic, but thinking of the work that they do with the land and their traditional healing practices, they have different tents or areas that are specific for Inuit or Métis or Mountain Dene, and they just have their different counselors. And so when people come, they get to just come and sit and have coffee, and if they're ready, they could ask for the help that they need. And so that's kind of an example of one of the models that we think is beautiful and would fit perfectly with the clinic. And so like Tasha said, we're not trying to, just do everything from the very start, because that's not even, things have been continuously happening and moving in our communities. They've just been at a level that has been disconnected. And so figuring out ways to bring those back or not even bring them back, to bring them up to to our other community members who don't have that privilege of being involved in them is something that we're really passionate about doing.
Right. We just had a conversation with a facility in the Twin Cities area, and I really liked how she talked about how they're meeting people where they're at, and that's so important for us when we work with our communities, because we're going to have to work through a lot of stuff, right? We've got a lot of trauma. There's just so many things that we have to unpack when we look at health and wellness in our communities, and so it's really important for us to not be judgmental and to really just meet people where they're at and just try to help them along that journey. I just want to remind everybody that we encourage you to ask questions. So if you have any questions for the group, I know we did have a question about the mobile unit, and I think Sunshine did a good job addressing that and why there's a need for that with our clinic. So just encouraging you guys to go ahead and chat in any questions that you may have for the group. So I think one other topic that we haven't really touched on quite yet is talking about how indigenous organized healthcare can contribute to the goal of self-determination. So, kind of what we're working on with our organization, I think is, we're not so much focused on say taking over the clinical aspect. Some people might talk about like 638, that's self-determination or, self-governance, I guess, but we're really focused on making sure that we, like Elena just said, that we're raising our methods of healing and wellness up to the top. We're not, it's not coming from a Western-centered medical model. And so do you guys have any input on what taking charge of our own health, how that contributes to the goal of self-determination?
So I'll just say one thing, and that is that I remember being at a food summit, an Indigenous food summit a long time ago, and an elder stood up, and this has been quoted many times since then, but he said, if we cannot feed ourselves, we cannot call ourselves truly sovereign. And I believe that that's so true when it comes to healing as well. You could say, if we can't heal ourselves, we can't call ourselves truly sovereign. And I want to be part of building sovereign communities and healthy communities for my children. So I think that that's super. Food sovereignty and wellness sovereignty are super important to self-determination.
And I think, Rupa, I'm going to call on you to talk a little bit. We had some good discussion about liberating our food systems and how important that is. And that really ties into Linda's comment about being able to feed ourselves.
Yeah, I believe, so we're working in Ohlone territory. We are working to rematriate 38 acres of land back to Ramaytush Ohlone people who haven't been in their traditional homelands as have a land holding in their traditional lands for over 250 years since the genocide here in California. So reattaching to land in a way where that relationship is protected is so important. But then growing food, not only when you are working with soil that is healthy and robust, and by that has lots of life in it and on it, your body is interacting with that ecology as well, which is really helpful for maintaining a robust and healthy gut microbiome. So all the critters that live inside our gut. We find that processed foods, even like Doritos, so something that you might think is relatively harmless, it has so many chemicals in it that it denudes, it actually gets rid of the biodiversity inside the gut. And the more biodiverse the gut is, the better it can counteract the inflammation that we see that causes diabetes and cardiovascular disease and Alzheimer's disease and cancer. And so when you are able to inoculate yourself through eating probiotic foods or through interacting with a really rich, diverse microbial world, the more likely your own gut will be diverse. And so growing food and having a relationship with that food and eating that food, that is part of that reawakening of relationships to the unseen world in the soil and on our plants. That is a vital piece of staying healthy. And for us, you know, what we're really looking at right now is creating financial and economic models where that food is then liberated from the capitalist model, the market economy. So much about the colonial model is making things private property, including our foods and our medicines, so that everything has to be paid for and exchanged with money. But if we can eliminate and create that system and that structure and create spaces of holding land together again and being on land together and growing food together and sharing that food together, that becomes not new, it's an old way of interacting that is actually very beneficial for our health. And so I don't think you can just do one of these things, which is also the very white Western way of doing it, is like, oh, you need microbes in your gut, here's a pill. It's not about a pill, it's about a system of relationships. And that is, you have to do the whole thing. And that means you have to get rid of the whole thing that is imposed. And by that, you know, part of that can mean going in and trying to overthrow it, which is really hard to do, or building the alternative, which is what's happening right now with this wind farm at Standing Rock and with this clinic and with this education, that if you can build these alternatives that feel authentically, when people interact with them, they'll feel better. They'll remember something. They'll hear a story that grounds them to something way bigger than this narrative of, you know, go out there, get your education, go make some money and live your isolated life. That doesn't resonate with people who've had, you know, thousands of years of history, like my people and your people. And so I don't want my children to grow up dissected from that reality. I want them to be deeply integrated into it. And we have been pushed by colonialism here onto this land as trillions of dollars were robbed from our nation. And so born and raised here, that connection for me has to be with the indigenous people and with the culture and the history that was here. And so we are working on a project, we're calling it Farming is Medicine, to do just that, to liberate food from the economic structure, to reframe farmers as ecological tenders of the land, and to re-envision health as a system of relationships, which is exactly what we're doing in your territory.
Amazing.
I think that's a really good point too, because we, like you had said before, that our connection with the land is so important to our overall, like, not only like spiritually and getting to know the land and that relationship of that land as our relative, but also with our microbiomes and ways that, like, especially now during COVID, where hand washing and sanitizing is what we have to do from other people, but that doesn't mean disconnecting from the land and not getting dirty, right? That's supposed to be something we're eating and putting our feet in water and putting, you know, making sure that we're connecting there always, and that's always going to be safe for us. And, you know, obviously without chemicals and things, but that, so yeah, reconnecting those things. And so somebody had really quick said, what are barriers we see? And that's it, is just like continuously having these conversations, continuously being in dialogue, is probably one of the best ways that we're going to keep getting these messages across. Because like I said about the birthing, when I was first imagining what my birth could look like, because I had 2 babies in the hospital already, and I went through that whole system. And when I got to, you know, I just had my 3rd baby at home in September. I had sisters come from all over, you know, Lakota territory to come bring me medicines and bring me gifts. And then we had a giveaway that, for me, it was like this process of undoing my own mental things that I put myself in, where I was like, oh God, why I should just go to the hospital. And even my own family, who's, growing up in the ways also, they were like, are you sure? What about the pain? What about this? What about, and all these things that we're taught to be afraid of. And so I think the process that I went through was trusting myself, and that took 9 months of dialogue. And so the barriers for what we're trying to do is just continuously having dialogue like this, so that we could keep, just re-liberating ourselves through foods, through our healing practices, through our medicines, and through our ceremonies. Because unless we're continuously talking about it and doing them, then we're always going to be like, doing those self limits putting those limits on ourselves.
Yes, absolutely. So I think we are already at the top of the hour. So I just want to go real quick. Everybody, last comments, short and sweet, and then we'll go ahead and wrap up our discussion for today. I don't know who wants to start. We'll start with Sunshine.
I am really grateful for these awesome collaborators on our team, and I know that our hearts are in the right place. And even though that we may face challenges as we continue forth with these models, I know that we're strong people who are resilient and looking forward to activating these any way we can, encouraging us to connect to the land and build beneficial relationships with each other.
Thanks, Sunshine. Linda?
Sure. Yeah, I'd just like to thank everyone for listening in today, and to remember to be safe, really safe, and take care of each other and feed each other, and feed yourselves good food. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Rupa.
I'm just so happy to be a part of this I guess the manifestation of this as it grows and matures into vision and manifestation. And I'm so proud and honored to be a part of this. So I think that this is truly the future of medicine. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rupa. And Elena.
Yes, I'm so thankful for all of the people who have held on to the visions and dreams of our foods and our medicines and our ceremonies for all of these centuries, and for the women that I get to dream with. Very thankful to be here.
Yes, and I'll just echo what everybody said, really feeling thankful, and again, for the powerful women that we get to work alongside. Not that we don't want men to get involved, but this is just a beautiful thing. And I just want to encourage everybody, you can keep up with us on our Facebook page. We have a Mini Wičhóni Clinic and Farm Facebook page. We also have a website, Mini Wičhóni Clinic and Farm. I don't know, Elena, can you pop it into the chat? Mini Wičhóni Clinic and Farm sorry, I don't have it.
I think it's just
.org. Perfect. And then I also
coming soon. Oh,
what's that?
Oh, sorry, I said our app is coming soon.
Yes, we'll be working on a mobile app, so stay tuned for that. But just feel free to reach out if you guys have questions, ideas, want to brainstorm with us. We're always open to collaborating and networking. And local people, if you want to get involved, reach out to Elena or myself or one of the board members. We really we're open to that. So I also want to just thank everybody for tuning in today. I encourage you to check out the Anpetuwi.com, ANPETUWI.com, and click on the donate button if you're interested in making a donation to Anpetu Wi for the Standing Rock Sioux Tribe. You can also follow Sage at SAGESRST on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And then, so yeah, again, just thank everybody for joining us today. Thank you to Sage for allowing us this platform to have this amazing discussion, and we look forward to more to come.
Dokshake.
Dokshake.
Sha.